Ed, for many months at the White House, was one of the first things the president asked for was for a review of everything. Some of it leaked out sort of in July, but as of Friday, when the president made a final decision, got to say, actually, there were no leaks out of that.
Kept it tight.
He gave his speech tonight. What was the lead up like, and what do you think of the result?
I saw you on Twitter saying that you were stunned by the lead up not being that exciting in terms of there was no buildup. I mean, this is a president giving his first major foreign policy address. He's talking about war and peace, and he's talking about finally winning this war, by the way, which is a big deal. And
it's like his first primetime address.
Absolutely, especially on a policy issue of this gravity. Here's the bottom line, one word: leadership. He stepped up to the plate tonight. He had a rough week last week, and he said, I am going to show leadership. He admitted that basically this is a flip-flop. That's not easy for any president to do, especially this president, who likes to show that he's tough, right? He said again and again, before he was running and when he was running, going back to at least 2011, get out. And he said, if I'm elected, I'm out. Enough with the money, enough with the lost lives, enough with the misadventure. But he said, look, I got behind that desk in the Oval Office, and I was elected to make tough decisions. This is a tough decision, but he kept using the other word, not just leadership, win. We're going to win. I think where it got fuzzy is he's going to have to come up with more details. And his supporters, when you say that, say, wait a second, we don't want to tell the Taliban how we're going to win. I get that. But you have to at least have some sort of a blueprint about beyond, yes, he said, we're going to kill terrorists. Everyone wants to kill terrorists. And we're going to stop nation building. And I think that's something people can rally around. Absolutely. But how you're actually going to do that, he still didn't lay out the details. However, big picture here, it was a leadership moment for him. He stepped up to the plate big time.
Kimberly, I thought one of the big news parts of the speech that might have seemed subtle, because he didn't dwell on it too much, was the fact that he called out Pakistan in particular, and then he leaned towards India more. So this is a broader regional strategy that he was trying to lay out, and basically putting Pakistan on notice. Like, we know what you're doing, harboring these terrorists. We're not going to accept it anymore. And those countries pay very close attention to what the president of the United States says. So if Pakistan thinks that the president of the United States has India in its favorite column, that will maybe get them to do something about it.
Yeah, and this, for me, was my favorite part of the speech. For me, this was the headline. This was the lead, because, you know, it's about time, because Pakistan has been harboring terrorists and supporting the Haqqani network, and they've been receiving untold amounts of money and support. It's supposed to be coalition building to help fight and counter terrorism measures. What have we gotten for our money? What have we gotten? You know, they had Osama bin Laden living large over there. We're not honest about that, but we had to take matters into our own hands. And you know what? Americans are sick of it, sick of their hard-earned money going over there to a country that is not being the right partner in this bargain, in this fight against terror. So they should be held accountable. You got to put the spurs in them, and that's what he did tonight. And in terms of having a strategic plan, I mean, I trust that he's going to listen to Matheson, to Kelly. They agree that pressuring Pakistan is the right way to squeeze them to get more out of their effort, which really has been middling to none up to this point. And look what President Trump, he said he was going to do this with ISIS. We've already been able to see that he's been beating them back. So I count on him to do the same here. And it is tough. He did say, and basically do an about face about Afghanistan. But you know what? He's listening to the people in the theater. He's listening to the special operators, special forces there, the CIA agents, and they're telling him this is what needs to be done. And putting more troops or making that commitment, that is leadership, and that is courage, and saying, you know what, I didn't have the information before. I have it now, and I'm going to follow through and do the right thing.
Excellent cowgirl reference, by the way.
Did you like that?
The Spurs? Excellent.
I caught that.
A couple of things that he's not able to spell out directly, because Greg will say, I am not going to tell you exactly what we're going to do. So one of the things that we don't know, although we kind of know, is that the rules of engagement have changed.
Right.
The way that we're doing intelligence in the region is changing. The way we're sharing it is changing. And you're kind of smiling. I'm not sure why. Because
it's a smirk.
Ed was giving me the eye.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. Kind of eye. So what I was going to ask you was, did President Trump just make the decision that leaving was worse than staying? And if you're going to stay, you may as well try to win it.
I think so. I mean, he's a typical neocon globalist. No, I kid. Actually, you knew this was different. How did you know this was different? One key factor. He said Pakistan, not Pakistan. And when you heard that, you go, things are changing. Things are going down. The man is saying Pakistan.
Thank goodness.
And so you knew that this wasn't the news.
This was a shift.
This was a shift. And so now he's looking at like the way Pakistan is to the Taliban is the way China is to North Korea. And so he's saying, okay, this is your mess, buddy. You got to clean it up. That leads to the next part, which is the mission statement. He finally gave a mission statement that was localized and specific and practical, which is, hey, he's telling the world, we're not into, and he's also telling people like Rand Paul, and he's telling a lot of people, this isn't nation building anymore. We're just here to kill terrorists. It's like a guy who's saying, look, dude, I'm just here to paint the roof. I'm not, doing any demolition. This is I'm a union guy, can only do one thing. He's making it.
Shingle the roof.
Yeah, shingle the, no, sometimes you can paint the roof.
So it's like a subcontractor.
Yeah, subcontractor. We're just here to do that. And the reason why, this is important, the reason why is what we're dealing with is not, this isn't like World War II, which we finished in under 4 years. We keep talking about length with this. And it's because this isn't really a war. What it is dealing with something that will never go away, and that is radical Islam. The goal here in Afghanistan and elsewhere is to prevent terror and nuclear holocaust. You prevent terror by seeking out the terrorists, and you prevent nuclear holocaust to make sure that the dirty bombs or any nukes that Pakistan has ends up in the hands of these terrorists. So the only way you can do that is by constantly being there. I'm sorry, but you can call this a neocon fantasy, but as long as there is Islamism, we're going to have to be out there, and we're going to have to be looking for these terrorists. And it's just something that's going to be there. That's why the idea of always bringing up 16 years and 17 years, this is not the
way to measure it.
The world has changed. We aren't fighting Japan. We aren't fighting a nation state. We are fighting a loosely knit group of factions that are all over the place.
That morphs and recreates.
It keeps changing. And when you think it's going to die, it comes right back up because it's an idea.
Isn't it interesting that an America First president now has strung together his bigger victories are on the world stage, standing down with North Korea, pushing them back. And now on the domestic front, he's struggling on taxes and healthcare and trying to get that back on track. But on the world stage, he's showing more leadership than his critics ever thought.
Juan, so he talked about the NATO partners needing to pay more and to help more. I don't know if they gave him enough credit for things that they have done up to now. I mean, have had sacrifices and losses as well. And there has been some help. But one thing that was different that had been sort of leaking out a little bit was that the president might try to reach out to the Taliban and go to talks with them. When he gave the final speech tonight, that was really not in there. It was sort of soft-pedaled, so he might be a little bit more skeptical on that because some thought that talking to the Taliban and signaling that was like giving a date certain like President Obama did, which would basically just let them wait us out.
Well, I did make my eyes flip over when I heard him say that he would allow the Taliban to be included in a new government for Afghanistan. We've never said such a thing. The Taliban's been our enemy. They've been killing Americans. They're part of the problem. And then you have them in cahoots with ISIS, the ISIS network that exists within Pakistan and in Afghanistan. But, I think there are a couple interesting things here. One, off the top, the president's clearly trying to get away from what happened last week in Charlottesville. He spent, I would say, a quarter of the top of the speech talking about racial healing,
that's our next
U.S.
block,
military, and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's the big block.
But I'm just telling you, I don't think there's any way getting away from the idea that he is still reacting to Charlottesville and trying to move away from it, and trying to move away from it by projecting strength as a military leader. So he's surrounded now by all the generals. Steve Bannon is gone. Steve Bannon, who opposed the idea of staying, suggested that we either outsource it, hire some people, maybe some private soldier types, some mercenaries, or just pull out, just leave, because he said there's no political payoff. And with that base that he has, really, his base is in line with the President Trump who was tweeting, hey, too much money, too many deaths. What are we getting out of this? And I think they still have that question because tonight, I didn't hear any specific number. Fox News and others are reporting it's about 4,000. Nobody thinks 4,000 troops are going to make a huge difference on the ground. The second thing is he didn't lay out a timeline. He didn't say, here's exactly what I want to do. Now, this was in reaction to President Obama having expressed a timeline. But the question then becomes, so exactly what is the U.S. commitment? How much longer can we be there And we're not involved in nation building. He's taking a shot at President Bush on that front, taking a shot at President Obama here. But the question comes back to, okay, you're letting the generals and the military advisors set your course. Well, what exactly is a victory? Should be that it would be a stable Afghanistan where a threat to the United States cannot be generated. But that is
to Greg's
too
point, trying to measure that and saying to people, oh, well, this will be done in 2 years, like that's giving people false hope, and he didn't do that tonight, and that's part of leadership too. I mean, I think that's really hard is to not be able to define it. And Kimberly, there have been successes.
So on that point, let me just say to that point then. So what you're saying is it's open-ended. Because he said this is not open-ended, this is not a blank check.
But you just said before that, you said he's letting the military commanders decide this stuff. Why is that a bad idea?
Because he's surrounded himself with
Give
generals.
them the flexibility.
General Kelly, right, McMaster, and others.
They know more about it than I do. They know more about it than the president does.
No, they should be informing the president, but he needs people who will say to him, listen, wait a second. Not only do we have political concerns here in the United States about the fact that we have this longest war in U.S. history, but there are concerns and other ways to go at this to succeed.
But,
I think he's starting to reflect that in terms of going at Pakistan.
If you're talking about the people that he's surrounded by men who know loss. These are men who have seen people die. In fact, his chief of staff suffered the greatest loss you can possibly have. He lost a child in war. So this is not about being hawks or doves. It's not about. These are thoughtful, careful warriors who know what it costs. So it's like when you talk about it being open-ended, I think they're talking about it being specific, small, agile, and ruthless, meaning that when you have a mission, you're going to go in there and do it as quickly as possible and get rid of them. It's not a large, static army that becomes a target. It is small, agile, and ruthless and brutal, and we'll take it to them as quickly as possible.
No, I think the Hawks are screeching tonight. The Hawks are screeching at the White House because when it was suggested that it just be a counterterrorism operation, they said no. We want to do more, and what we want to do is to try to get the Afghan army up on its feet so that they can fight the war for their own country.
That's what he said.
Okay, but how long have we been trying that strategy?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I do think that there had been some ambiguity in the previous administration and that the Afghan government did not know. And so, the president has several audiences all at once tonight. One was the military, so important for them to hear what he has to say. There's the citizens at large. There's the enemy. And then there's the allies like NATO. And then there's the Afghan people and the Afghan government. So now they can wake up in the morning, or they probably are already awake, given the time change. Good morning. And they wake up and they say, look, guys, here's our chance. He said he's with us. It's not open-ended. We have got to get our act together. And Kimberly, I'll give you the last word.
Thank you, Dana, for trying to repeatedly come to me. God bless you. So Trump's
Wait, I have one more thing, Kimberly.
Zip it, buddy. So Trump's key challenge is really trying to impact the psychology of the situation in Afghanistan and really empower the people and their military there to be able to stand up to the Taliban, stand up to al-Qaeda, to know that they have the backing unresoundingly of the United States, without question. So I'm going to trust that he's done his homework and he's listening to people that he should, that actually have military service and have been in that theater and understand, yes, loss, and they understand strategy and what they need to do in that geopolitical region. So they're going to make a very specific determination about the troops that are there, what kind, whether you have special forces operators there, covert ops, all of the above, to make sure that it's tactical and that they have information, real-time intelligence coming from the ground. Let them do their job. I'm going to take him at his word for that.
Wait, and they need Taliban, not Taliban.
Taliban.
Yes.
And there have been a lot of successes preventing terrorist attacks, preventing the safe haven, providing space for girls and young children to be able to go to school and women to be able to leave their homes without fear.
And ending the Pakistan sanctuaries, because the Taliban always has some place, some hole to crawl back into, and Pakistan has been harboring them. Shame on you. Go and blow up their sanctuaries.
All right, coming up, President Trump began his speech with some powerful words about the state of affairs here in America, as Juan was just saying. We're going to play that next for you.
I love that song.